Hi, and welcome to Drafting Compliance with Hyperproof. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about gap analysis. As always, I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and Tom, I have a bit of good news for you, actually. I canceled my wine club subscription.
I'm sure that isn't true, but I bet you did get some beer in the mail.
I genuinely canceled my wine club subscription. The reason why is my favorite winery actually had a sale. They're moving and love them a lot, so I went and bought cases and cases and cases of it. So I think I'm set for wine for the next year, I hope.
Oh.
But I know today we're going to be talking about a beer, right?
As always, we're going to kick off our episode of Drafting Compliance by sampling a craft beer and getting your take on it. So
I want to say I've had this in my fridge, and I want you to zoom in on that picture there, if you will. I had this at eye level every time I opened my refrigerator, and this man does not look like he's having a good time.
Oh. I think he looks like he's about to sing some kind of riff. I'm not sure exactly what's going on the can, but it looks like a microphone or something in the front there. I don't know.
But this beer, it's also got like an eyeball on it too. So
yeah,
again, very unique.
So this is from Oliphant Brewing, which is in my neighborhood. It's up in Wisconsin, just outside of actually the Twin Cities, so just over the border in Wisconsin from Minnesota. It's called Super Squishy. It is a sour beer. So if you look at, sort of rank all of my favorite beers, sours are usually not high on the list, although I've had a number of them that are quite good. This one has blackberry, raspberry, and coconut in it. So it's a sour ale.
Yeah, I love that they've got the tasting notes posted right on the can. And I will say, I'm one of those people that I like coconut milk, but not coconut flakes. So that's just like not my thing. And also, Tom, I've got that brand new beer glass that you sent. So thank you for that. Apparently, It will make the beer taste better, you said, right?
It opens it up, so it has, you get more of the aromatics associated with it. But yeah, let's pour it and have a look. Oh my, I'm going to tell you right away, the color.
Different color than the last one.
Yeah, this has a,
oh dear, it's
almost
not all
like
going
a
to
grapefruit.
Fit.
Yeah, it's
not
not
sure
this
I
is
like
a big
this.
Can.
Oh, that's the problem. Okay. Did I do the head right?
You did great.
Okay,
yeah, so
good.
I'm not sure if the camera picks it up, but this has almost a grapefruit appearance when it's being poured.
Kind of cloudy too. I mean, I've seen things like this come out of a sewer.
It's definitely an ale. So if we smell it.
Oh, that smells like ale with something rotten fruit.
Well, I smell the sour in it, if that makes sense. I smell the taste a little bit, I guess.
Maybe like weirdly like raspberry or some kind of like.
Yeah, I get the berry smell in it for sure. Which
some
it has
berry.
It in it.
What's this supposed to have? Blackberry. No, it's been a while since I've had. Oh, it says raspberry right on the can.
Raspberry and blackberry both. Yeah, I get a little bit of berry.
Read that.
I do not detect the coconut. I'm going to give it a taste.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about gap analysis. Gap between, say, example, wine and beer.
Well, it's definitely sour. It's
oh gosh, that's. Oh.
So your reaction, as always, a little stronger than mine.
Oh, I get the coconut. Oh.
Yeah, the coconut comes late.
Oh. And now berries. That's not right.
Well, I'll say this about it. The coconut is subtle, but it comes late. It's on the back of the finish. Up front, you get the sour. But it's not overpowering sour like many of the sours I've had. It's actually a pretty good sour. You definitely taste the berries. The berries stick around the longest.
Yeah.
Well, that's Super Squishy from Oliphant Brewing. Not one of Kayne's favorites. But I'm going to tell you, as far as I would summarize as this: if you like sours, you'll like it. If you don't like sours, you may like it, because sours are not one of my favorite, but I find this pretty palatable.
If you don't like beer, you won't like it. Now, our prior agreement was that I was going to do a 2 to 10 scale, and I'm already refactoring the scale associated with this, now knowing that there are things worse than the 2. Let's keep this one on. Oh, geez, then we have to do maths. It's less than a 2, more than a 1, but let's round up and still call it a 2.
Okay. 2. That's interesting. Well, I find this easily drinkable, so I could enjoy this probably on a summer's day pretty easily. So I'm going to give it a 6. on a scale,
6.
because sours are still not what I would normally reach for, but I find this pretty good.
Fantastic. Well, let's move on to gap analysis. So, as part of doing FedRAMP moderate, you came into the organization, you evaluated kind of, and I've done consulting before, so gap analysis is not new. So it's kind of a where we are and where do we need to be. So tell me how you got that process started, Tom.
Yeah, that's a great question. Is as you indicated, I'm new into the organization, so I've not been a hyperproofer for long. Although I can already tell you the company feels very much like my family already. So that's one of the benefits of being at Hyperproof. But I had to quickly kind of determine where we sit in terms of our current compliance sitting. Now, I want to draw the line of difference between information security and compliance here because they are two different things. We have a very mature InfoSec posture, meaning a lot of the pieces that you would expect in a mature security organization are in place because we built this thing greenfield not many years ago. So that gives us a leg up in the information security world. In the compliance world, that means all of those steps that you've taken are well documented and you've generated proof associated with them. You know that.
Yeah, and in
So
our case, we're already SOC 2 Type 2, so we've got some of those artifacts existing.
that's right. We have a number of those existing, although when you look at a SOC 2, that's a very prescriptive scope. And
Mm-hmm.
you have the ability to influence the scope in SOC 2 as well. Not so much in FedRAMP. FedRAMP is the scope is very large. It's not it is prescriptive, like you know what you're going to get audited, but it's not narrow in band at all. So you have a lot to look under. In the case of moderate, you have 325 controls in which to um, document appropriately, generate proof, have organized, and hand off. So what I did was pretty simple. When you come in an organization like this, which from a compliance perspective, we're somewhere in between greenfield and mature,
Mm-hmm.
I gather up all of the artifacts that are in place. And
And
part
when
of
you
that
say
is
artifacts, that's like policies, procedures, anything else you looked at?
guidelines and standards, which there were a
Okay,
couple of those as
fantastic. Did
well.
we have any yellow sticky or any paper notebooks that you had to examine too? I sometimes have found those.
Yeah, I have found those in my past too. You and I both come from a compliance consulting practice, but no, here we
Okay.
are all digital. So I was combing through secure shares essentially. But the good news is fairly well organized. So I knew
Mm-hmm.
pretty quickly where to find things. And when I didn't, there was somebody who could point me there. So when you look at that, you want to have a good understanding of what you want to compare against, right? In this case, for me, it's the FedRAMP moderate control set. I am very familiar with that control set. And certainly I brushed up on the 17 family of controls before I started that. But essentially, I want to say, okay, are we already suggesting that we're doing something in policy and or procedure? And if we are, can I prove that in one way or another? So for instance, one way of proof is to say we have some automated system that generates proof. I can tie it directly back to the policy or procedure, and we are good. In other cases, it's you talk with the SME who has responsibility for that particular act or control, and you ask them to generate that proof.
Mm-hmm.
In in my case, we were in a very compressed timeline. So I'm trying very hard to move quickly to implement. So I skipped over much of the interview. I did some of the interviewing, so don't get me wrong. I talked with a lot of
Okay.
people really quickly. But what I didn't do is sit down with anybody for a day and say, let me follow you through what you're doing on a daily basis. If I had more time, that's probably a more comfortable way for me to get in a position where I understand how informal controls are potentially being accomplished. If that makes
All
sense.
right. And so looking at that, then you kind of spoke a little bit to a challenge there of just not having enough time. When you're thinking of documenting all of this, all of these gaps for gap analysis, were there any other challenges that you ran into that other organizations might face?
Yeah, I would say no matter where in the life cycle of a project like this you sit, you're going to always have a struggle with resource time. So think of it this way: when you're doing compliance work to get a program move forward, you're sort of working on the business and you're not working in the business, if that makes sense. You're asking a bunch of operational folks to step out of their daily task assignments, sprints, whatever it is that they're working, whatever methodology they're working in, and pivot to a new set of work that basically asks them to prove they're doing what they think they already do, right? So it's not necessarily work that they wanted they're
So it's not
excited
exciting.
about
They're
doing
not
it.
going to be
Right.
thrilled about that opportunity.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right. But we walked through that in again, in the sense of my timeline, I was very compressed. So I walked through a deeper dive on one control set of one family of controls. So access control is what I took a deeper dive in. And those were most of the questions I asked, right? So I said, how are we doing session timeouts? How do we manage people that come and go in the organization, right? So there's, I think, 43, 44 controls just in access control. So by diving deep in that one control family, I had a pretty good understanding of how we, in a larger sense, have approached compliance in the organization. So I took a shortcut and I extrapolated from one control family what I thought it was going to be across all control families, where I should say that a little differently. I reviewed all policy, so I knew where we were missing policy and procedure.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of operationalizing those controls, I took a leap of extrapolating from one family. That's purely because of the timeline. So if you're going to do this as honest and as well documented as you possibly can, you would actually physically walk through all of those things, each control family, and understand the gap analysis.
Okay, so
I just
and you could be wrong, right? And I think you've probably had these situations too, where somebody doesn't show you an artifact, document, a policy, whatever, and then as part of your readout to the client, they have said, "Well, wait, you didn't ask me, and I've got this." They pull out a massive document, so that still could happen, right? Where you could have missed or omitted an artifact, right?
oh
And that would actually be a
100%.
good thing in this case because we're
Yep,
working internally on the business as opposed to a consultancy where you're giving them a readout that they're presumably playing, good coin for it, right?
that's right. And then the other thing that's important to know is you may in fact have let's pick a policy, an access control policy in place. That access control policy doesn't necessarily meet the requirements of FedRAMP.
Right.
So So it's one thing to have the policy in place. And so for instance, I read through our access control policy. I would say it's 60 to 70% of the language in there met FedRAMP, but we
Mm-hmm.
needed to edit it to make it FedRAMP compliant, right? And most of those edits were to formalize controls that are already in place.
All right. And how have you been communicating all of this, all of these gaps that you've been finding? Have you found something that works really well? Is this going into a PowerPoint deck? You're writing this up in just lengthy Word documents? Are you putting yellow stickies on a wall and making a
Yeah.
spider web with like red string? What you doing for that communication of gaps?
Yep. Perfect. So I pulled together a PowerPoint presentation, presented it to the leadership team. Really the goal of that was to inform them of where I think we sat day one of the project
Mm-hmm.
and give them a sense of the lift given the timeline that we needed to go through. So in our case, we're on a 12-month timeline. It's extremely aggressive. I think by any organizational measure, that's an aggressive timeline. The average
That
is
is.
18 months, but the
Mm-hmm.
average also contemplates a dedicated team of SMEs. So what we have here is very compressed. So in order to get that that project plan built, I really worked backwards from the timeline. So I built a timeline that said, hey, if we want to be ATO certified by the end of 2023,
Mm-hmm.
what are the pieces of that process that are outside of my control, namely the timeline of the sponsorship and the timeline of the authorization board. And then I said, what is the average timeline for a 3PAO to do a readiness assessment?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that together, if it runs smoothly, the part out of my control is 6 months.
So that means that we'd have to plug any gaps that you identified during gap analysis in the next 6
6
months.
months. That's
All
correct.
right.
And that's how we derived our project timeline. It's pretty simple math. And here's what we didn't contemplate is we did not contemplate what that means to existing resources in the organization. We are certainly contemplating that as we go through the project now. But if I were to say there is one mistake that we've made so far, it's that we were not more forceful upfront with the resource requirements needed.
Okay, and that's just making sure that people understand that either this is a new task on top of their existing workload or that we might actually have, are you suggesting we might have to have additional dedicated resources to support this effort?
Well, that's certainly an option. I would say
Okay,
we
so that's
have.
something you'd see in other organizations, right? Where you could bring in like a
Yep.
consultancy or bring in additional like contract resources.
Yep. Those are certainly options. And I'll tell you this, if you're going to bring in contract resources, if you're going to put them directly on the project, they're probably going to be documentation specialists and or
Mm-hmm.
SMEs on the compliance platform itself. You're not going to bring in SMEs from an outside vendor that are operational experts in your environment. That,
Right.
I mean, that's a sure way to misstep in compliance, in my opinion. So what
Definitely,
you
because
don't want to,
there's going to be time required to actually train them up on what the
yeah,
existing
yeah,
procedures
they've got,
even are, and they will fail an interview 100% of the time. Well, 98% of the time. But we're getting
right.
ahead of ourselves, right? So you said that resources were a gap and possibly our first mistake. I think my first mistake was 24 beers in a year. I think I'm gonna write that one down as possibly. I mean, it's character building is what we're gonna go with.
That's right.
So that's kind of where we are on gap analysis. Anything else, Tom, to close out the episode?
The only thing I would say is if you're doing this in your organization, there are some maybe a couple bright spots that you should make sure you absolutely have sorted out as you go in. First is you should have leadership commitment at the top of your organization.
Definitely.
So if you're going through any compliance journey and you don't have buy-in at the leadership level, one, it's required by most frameworks, but two, you're going to fail in terms of achieving what you set out to achieve initially. The second thing
This just
is
cannot be a bottom-up arrangement. It's got
that's
to
right.
be driven from the top.
Yeah. And the second thing I would say is if you already have a framework in place, you are light years ahead of many organizations that are going on FedRAMP journey,
Hmm.
and find a tool set that allows you to move that current framework forward into FedRAMP.
And when you say a framework, you mean something like NIST cybersecurity framework or
Yep.
Center for Internet Security's critical security controls or something like that, right? Not just
You've
the
got it.
framework that Joe, who is in the basement, thought up the other day.
Yeah, you are correct. If you're using one of the widely accepted industry security frameworks, you will be able to move into FedRAMP more easily. You're still going to have to edit a bunch of documentation, but you still will have a enormous step forward of where you would be otherwise.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think our next episode will be coming out. We'll probably, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. I think it's going to be the progress we make in this sprint, right? That'll
Yeah,
probably be one of our
absolutely.
first things. Any obstacles that we face, any obstacles we overcome. Hopefully, more obstacles that we overcome. And again, a different beer than I'm going to be frightened of anything. This has just got like 80s graffiti logo, so I'm going to be feared of anything else that comes in the mail that looks like that. But
Oh, well,
Tom,
I
as
enjoyed
always.
it.
Yeah, uh, I'm glad that you did. I can still taste a little bit of it, even despite drinking water. But with that, again, this has been Drafting Compliance. We will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.